Before we get off this topic of changing culture, just a question to think about. Why is culture in general so hard to change, so difficult to change? And really, it's because culture is part of the DNA of any organization. Another word we can substitute for DNA is the system of any organization. What do we mean by system? By system, we mean any organization's interlocking set of goals, values, practices, and assumptions. So cultural change in education would necessitate reevaluating goals, values, practices, and assumptions through the eyes not of just educators, but of business people, through the eyes of the hiring managers and project managers. Just something to think about. Again, wonderful comments by Bill Simons. Agree totally. Bill also mentioned standardized testing. And as a part of shifting culture, perhaps not focusing so much on standardized tests, but rather focus on a student's skills, their strengths, their passions. I love all of that. I agree with Bill completely. Another panelist, David Miyashiro, who is a superintendent in the San Diego area, made a wonderful comment about standardized testing with regards to what it shouldn't do and what it could do. And it's a really great comment. Listen to this.
And it's a design flaw. Our system measures, are you smart or not, by standardized tests, and says if you're smart, you go there, and if you're not, you have these other options. But the question should be, is how are you smart? And that's Keith Nuthall in my ear, one of our colleagues, saying that school should be an opportunity for kids to explore everything and find their strengths and interests and how they are smart and how they will be successful and enjoy their work.
Yeah, I really appreciated David's comment there. Just kind of to add an observation to this thought of standardized testing. Standardized tests are about 100 years old, been around for about 80 years or so. The reason why they came into existence is our culture is a culture based on measurement. And what we mean by that is that if something can be measured, we can place a value on it. If we can't measure it, how can we place a value on it? So for example, in education, I can measure if a student knows their multiplication tables. I can measure that through standardized testing. I can measure whether or not a student has reached a certain reading level. That's measurable. I can, by a test, tell if a student passed a biology or science course. Did he get good grades on his tests, yes or no? And so with standardized testing, you can measure and check off yes, no, and we can measure that. And when we can measure it, we can say there is value here. Whereas something like soft skills, that's a little more difficult to measure. We have our methods of doing it, but in education, it's very hard to say, okay, let's measure and see if this person improved in their ability to be flexible, to be adaptable, to be determined. How do you measure if a child's attitude has improved with regards to being able to work with others? Soft skills are harder to measure and therefore harder to put value on. It's not that teachers and again, people who are hiring students, we know the value of it, but because they can't be measured, for some reason, they're not taught explicitly in school. So I just thought I'd throw that in with regards to discussions of standardized testing and what we do, which is trying to help students develop the skills that employers want. All in all, a fantastic session. This was just the opening remarks. In the following parts of this review, I'll talk a little bit more about what I found interesting and encouraging from the other panelists.